So I sent out, well past midnight, last night, this tweet from Matt Sluka, the quarterback at UNLV. I've decided to utilize my red shirt year and will not be playing any additional games this season. I committed to UNLV based on certain representations that were made to me which were not upheld after I enrolled. Despite discussions, it became clear that these commitments would not be fulfilled in the future. I wish my teammates the best of luck this season. I hope for the continued success of the program. I sent that out to the group chat that we have, knowing that at any moment I would get, again, that's a fake account. It's not fake. This is true. We have a lot of different weeds to get to before we get to a slideshow that Paul and Garrett have put together to kind of wrap up what is going on. It's this day and age where UNLV right now is the center of the college football universe with realignment and now with this story.
Yeah, this is really bizarre, but this was kind of bound to happen. Jack described it as this is kind of the first holdout. You could compare it to the NFL, but it's not so much of a holdout as it is he's just leaving. He's just gone. He's going to another school. He was not happy about whatever they told him in his, whatever. There's so many things to do this, but this was inevitable. It was going to happen somewhere. I hate that it happened to Barry Odom, a coach that I personally like a lot. But, I guess everybody's got to look out for their own best interest, and he feels like he was lied to. But I don't really know what side to take here because we've got two varying stories of what happened here, and I'm not completely sure what to believe.
Well, I don't think we have to just jump and take a side. I think it's more than fair for everybody to sit back, and I know that's not the way of the world, but to sit back and see what everybody has to say about this. And so far, I'm unmoved by either side that's come out and said what they've said, which we'll get to. I just think this is an unfortunate product of the environment that has been created in college athletics and particularly college football. We knew this day was coming, and there were warning signs that this day would eventually come, and just to see it actually happen was a little bit jarring and startling because as much as you knew this was likely at some point, it's still just crazy to see it actually happen and happen 1 month into a season where you've got a team that's looking very well like they could be the G5 rep in the college football playoff and are well on their way to having a pretty special season under Barry Odom and maybe even joining the Pac-12 here pretty soon. Like, how could it get any better? Top 25, like all this kind of stuff that can be accomplished and they're in the midst of accomplishing and beating a couple Big 12 teams. I mean, the list, it's been a busy month for this UNLV team, and to have that just suddenly stopped in its tracks and a main piece of that team just pull himself out of the race because he's not getting his money, like that's just not something that we see in any other sport, but it is unique to college football because the powers that be created this environment in so many ways, and this is the chickens coming home to roost. As much as I hate it, as much as I think it sucks for the sport, like this, let's say that, this sucks for the sport. To have a quarterback just like a month into the season on a really good team say, oh, I'm not getting my money. Like, this is where the NFL fans are like, see, that's just stupid. Like, this is why we watch, like, we got contracts. Guys are playing.
Unions.
There's like, we know that there's rules to everything, health, everything. This is where college football, I don't think is the best sport in the world right now. I think it is in a lot of other ways, but in this way, this roster management that's constantly ongoing and really has no rules in place. People used to bring up guardrails, used to get like picked on, on social media because it's like, oh, being old and crabby or whatever. It's like, no, I just want something that's got some semblance of an actual organization, where if you're a starting quarterback, you don't just bolt a month into the season and leave your team out to dry because somebody in the NIL side of things didn't follow through on their promise. Now, I don't know, everybody's pointing fingers, but I just think it sucks for UNLV. I hate it for UNLV fans first and foremost, and whoever's on the wrong side of this, I hate it for them as well. If it's Matthew Sluka, so be it, but the whole situation sucks.
Maybe it's everywhere. Okay, so let's try to, if we can, summarize in what is a slideshow that again, I'm not smart enough to be able to do the slideshow, and that's why we have brilliant people like those who are here today other than me. Former UNLV quarterback Matthew Sluka's NIL representation told ESPN he was verbally promised $100,000 from a UNLV assistant coach for transferring, and that money has not yet been paid. So there's the first thing. Once Sluka enrolled, there was no effort by UNLV's to formalize a contract at that amount. Months after Sluka enrolled, Cromartie, who's the agent, made multiple efforts with staff in the school about the issue. He said the school and collective came back with a contract to pay him over the next 4 months a certain amount of money.
$3,000 per month.
Well, $88,000 less than the $100,000 that he was promised. So $3,000 a month for 4 months. The only money Sluka received from UNLV per Cromartie was a relocation stipend when he came over from Holy Cross. Cromartie said that there was supposed to be more money after UNLV's hot start. Only the initial amount has been paid up front. Now, I believe we have, what is this, Adam Rittenberg is next? More from Bob Sluka, the father of the quarterback. We're a hardworking family to be able to have an athlete live, be able to like this, and don't even really care how much about the money, but there is something else to it. He's not the first athlete to have this happen. Okay, that's the father. They keep deferring. We don't know. You have to wait. Then it was like, well, we're going to have to give him game checks. So that's great. We did not ask for a single dollar more. Sluka added that Matt's living expenses weren't even covered. Sluka, the father of the quarterback, mentioned again, agreed to an NIL deal with the school back in February, received payments despite request, and never asked for any adjustments to the deal, because that's been also reported that he did. Okay, I already said that part. Now, this is from Ross Dellinger. Some pretty wild news to start your Wednesday. The story that we've told you about Sluka. Redshirting now, announcing his redshirt after commitments promised to him went unfulfilled. Rebels are unbeaten, and the school in the center of the latest conference realignment story. Now, this is again from Ross Dellinger. Nothing was signed, but that coaches promised him $100,000. Brennan Marion, a very highly thought of offensive coordinator, Cromartie, the collective, may not have agreed to the $100,000, but the coaches did. Then this one from a reporter out of that area. Per sources, Sluka has been approached with more money to transfer. So we'll get to the conference realignment in a minute. It sounds like to me that somebody may have been promised money, but I also have read more recently, nothing was ever signed, Paul and Craig, for the $100,000, but at least the promise. So the agent's an idiot if he didn't get something signed.
Yeah, I mean, always get it in writing, always get it signed, always get confirmation on that before you agree to something. So the agent, and he works for Equity Sports, which is run by Chris Cabot, who has represented Patrick Mahomes in the past when he was with Lee Steinberg. So this agency has people in it that know what they're doing, but Marcus Cromartie is a former NFL player, and he's now an agent. And UNLV either refused to put it in writing or they never got it in writing. But at that point, Matthew Sluka had been in the transfer portal for quite some time when he committed in February. And I remember reading an article about him in On3 and hey, this is the next round of FCS quarterbacks that could transfer up to the FBS and see, what they could do, who's the next Cam Ward kind of a thing. And so I as I monitor the transfer portal, I kept monitoring Matthew Sluka because he had ridiculous numbers at Holy Cross, ridiculous numbers. And he was just kind of there in the portal, and the pieces are moving all over the board. And then he hadn't committed. And then, obviously UNLV had an opening. Jaden Maava went to USC. So he goes there. And then that happened in February. He didn't get there until July because he had to finish his semester at Holy Cross to keep the eligibility in this red shirt that he has. So he got there, and then according to his people, that they just kept pushing the goal line back on when they were going to make the payments. And then according to them, they're like, well, we never promised anything other than this and some monthly payments. So there's somewhere in the middle, or somebody's telling the truth here, but there's a ball dropped here on a lot of people's parts when it comes to Matthew Sluka. And I hope it's not just as simple as, somebody offered him more money and he left, because then that's going to make him look really bad.
I mean, y'all have explained a lot of the details, and to me, it just sounds like both sides are moronic and foolish.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you agree to go somewhere and you don't have any guarantee about the money you're about to make? Like, you didn't sign a contract, your agent, and like, we know that not all of these agents are like the Lee Steinbergs of the world. There's a lot of that wishy-washy, like former high school coach or uncle that's a handler that's now an agent or whatever. And I'm sure there's mighty fine people that have turned into pretty good business people in this new frontier of college sports. But I don't think that that's the case for everybody. And in this case, nobody's good at business. Like, nobody's good at figuring out what the freaking purpose of this entire arrangement was, because one side thinks that, oh, well, you didn't sign anything, so this is kind of what we loosely agreed to. And the other side, like, they think they've been promised hundreds of thousands of dollars and yet have apparently not signed anything. So to me, it sounds like a program and a school and a player and his family who are in over their heads when it comes to negotiating deals like this. That's my main takeaway from this, and that there has to be some better representation and communication on all sides to ensure that something like this doesn't happen. I understand it was late in the process, so maybe they promised me they won't back out. I'll go ahead and go there, but like, for the next players that come along, like, guys, get it in writing. Get some assurances that when you go somewhere, you're getting a certain amount of money and there's no backing out of it because of miscommunication. On the UNLV side of things, I don't know how they thought they were just getting this dude on the cheap and that the money would never come due. I'm sure we'll hear more details about this. I think Barry Odom's a smart guy, so I don't know, but it's obviously one big, giant mess of people believe in one thing and others believe in another, and nobody being on the same page whatsoever. So this is why you need a proper collective, and this is why you need everybody to be on the same page with things like this, because otherwise you might be undefeated and having a historic year and lose your starting quarterback 1 month into the season. So this is a story that you knew was coming at some point, and it's
100%.
just amazing to see it.
100%. And how many more of these do we have right before a bowl season or the college football playoff or a conference championship where you want more money? And then another thing is this. The two backup quarterbacks, D'Angelo Irvin Jr., last year played most of the season as a wide receiver. He's a quarterback in high school from Midwest City, Oklahoma. They've produced some pretty good talent. Cameron Friel, those two guys combined are 2 for 2 for 72 yards. Friel played a lot in 21, 226 passes, 1,600 yards. But since that time, he's basically thrown 50 passes. Did not play at all last year. So this is who they have. Now, we've known Barry Odom. We've had him on. We've had him on 2 or 3 times. In fact, a couple of times this year. One of the stories that was also reported by a national columnist is that somebody came to his office to share that this story was developing, and he basically said, we don't have any money. We don't have the money. So if in fact there was more money asked for.
Well, I believe that because I do think the whole we're Las Vegas and we're in Las Vegas so we have millions of dollars is way overblown. I don't think that packs nearly as much of a punch. I think the market's great. I think that is something that works in their favor, but let's face it. They're not getting the Big 12 invite as much as they wanted it, or the ACC invite or whatever, at least not right now. And they're in the new pack, which is a step up, but we still don't know how much of a step up it really is because we don't know about any TV deal that they've arranged at this point. So I wouldn't be surprised if UNLV doesn't have the money because it's just like, oh, it's in Vegas. No, it doesn't apparently. Like, you'd think that they'd have Dana White or somebody in Las Vegas would have this big war chest built up, but I believe Barry Odom that they probably don't have it. So if they don't have it, then what understanding was he under that they're getting this big-time transfer quarterback, albeit late and albeit not one of the top guys, and that they were just working on the arrangement of the money when he came in? And I'm not also lost on this part of it. I wouldn't doubt for 1 second that Hugh Freeze or whoever, and, just because he's the kind of guy you think of that would be tampering, or Lane Kiffin's accused him here in the last hours of doing as much. It would surprise me if anybody in the country's calling him as well and saying, hey, buddy, you got that one more year and we can pay you some money.
Yep.
So go ahead. So I'm not under the I'm not foolish enough to think that that's not also a factor here potentially.
Here's something, though, like in the realism of how much Matthew Sluka can help you. He's a 48.3% passer at this point in the season.
He's 21 of 48.
Yeah. So, look, at the FCS level, he was dominant, an absolutely dominant player. But on the FBS level, through 3 games, he's 21 of 48, and that includes the fact that he has Ricky White Jr., who's one of the better wide receivers in the country, especially at the FBS level, out there playing for him. So, yes, you might go ahead. Yeah, we've got 100. Like, there's a lot of schools that call me like $100,000. We'll give you 150 just because we can. Like, we can do that, but are you getting a $150,000 quarterback? That I don't know, because he's 48% on the year, and his completions for the most part have come to guys that are wide open.
Well, they run the ball incredibly well, but he did produce nearly 5,000 yards.
An athlete on top of an athlete. He's a really good athlete.
He's produced over 52 or 300 yards passing at Holy Cross. Now, so there's that story. In the chat room, some of you have your opinions on this. Do you believe anybody? What do you really think is the real story? Because we have seen some of the best national columnists have their take, and, of course, they have their sources. And this is a mess. Now, Craig brought this up because he's right. Back when NIL and the transfer portal and other things started to hit all at once, one of the things that we would bring up, and especially if I said it, get off my lawn or whatever, is that no matter the players and the athletes get the money. I've never been against that. I think it's great. But there has to be structure. It's not the Wild Wild West, and it has been now for a couple of years. The House settlement's trying to figure some of that out. Somebody brought that up in the chat, and they can't even figure it out because they can't come to an actual agreement and make sure it's passed through a judge. So
you reap what you sow. I mean, that's basically what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you reap what you sow, and the system was the way that it was, to the point where they can't enforce anything. And they know if they go to court, they're going to lose that lawsuit because they're 0 for 100 in their last 100 cases. At least that's the way that it feels like when monitoring all of the different back and forths in the courtroom. So, yeah, I mean, like you said, not at all anti-player. Hell, we'll celebrate guys getting their goods and think that's long overdue. But my big hang-up all along is the same one that you just mentioned, was just like, hey, this is all great. This is all cool. It makes for a very interesting world, but, like, it's just so sloppy, arranged. And it's just so hard to, like, distinguish what's on the up and up and what's just an empty promise of, like, just, hey, come here and, yeah, we'll have 100,000 for you. And, no, we'll not sign anything. And, we'll just wing it. Like, you just wing it and you see what happens. So there has to be a better way to organize this, but yet what rules can you put in place that actually can be enforced? And that's the big problem, is like, you can't really do anything because every time you try to do something, it gets shot down by another lawsuit. And that's the just messed up position you find yourself in as a sport in college football right now.
Is this Jaden Rashada?
I mean,
in a different way.
Chua, much like,
Yeah, that was more of a recruitment. He didn't get the money. He left. He's now. God knows where is he? At Georgia?
Yeah, he's at Georgia.
All right, nice.
Arizona State now at Georgia, waiting his turn there. But yeah, his is different. He apparently had signed paperwork, as where Matthew Sluka does not, which means, like, I don't know what the legal recourse is there. Something else to consider about Vegas. There's obviously billions upon billions of dollars flowing through Vegas, but to UNLV in particular, no, because it's not the lifeblood of the Vegas sports scene, obviously. And, I think people look back to, the Jerry Tarkanian years where clearly had some money running through that basketball program. But, I mean, that's a basketball program in the 90s, not a college football program now. And who owns everything in Vegas? Are they Vegas natives? For the most part, no. They're corporations, they're big things. There's no Joe Caesar that owns Caesar's Palace. It's not, I know there's the Wynn and all that, but that's still another big, like, corporate structure. So until those people have an interest in UNLV, the big, Phil Knight type money that we roll into UNLV is not going to be that big.
Yeah, there's a lot of money in Las Vegas that's not apparently in their NIL fund for football, and that's not a knock on them. It's just like, that's a reality check, I think, when you hear UNLV's exploding and all this. Love that fan base, think that they're, going to be happy with the pack and all of that if that's how it works out, or whatever the situation may be. Glad they're at least getting some attention. But, yeah, this is a really bad look at a time when you should be celebrating and loving every minute of this season and the possibilities off the field, and instead you've got – the UNLV Jaden Rashada story, basically. Although with the Jaden Rashada story, I mean, he had it in writing. He had a lawsuit ready to go, and he had a lot more money on the line. He had, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars that were promised to him, that he received. He had millions that were promised to him, millions. that he never received, and nearly 10 was what the figure was, I believe, that eventually we learned about. So, yeah, I mean, he took that to court and got out of his NIL with his letter of intent with Florida, and so that was a much bigger story because he's a much bigger quarterback prospect, and that was a much bigger actual contract, whereas this was a guy who was attractive late in the portal, who's got some game to him, but is not like a total package NFL quarterback, but was good enough for what UNLV needed, and just there wasn't the type of, I guess, agreements and such in place. This sounds like it was all just talked about over dinner or something. We'll work on it later, and then they never worked on it later or something.
Well, someone, Laura Weiss, doesn't the kid have a scholarship? What was he doing with the money he was getting through the scholarship? Because players get money, the cost of tuition, etc., but this is something separate, so no matter what he was getting or not.
Yeah, everybody else gets that.
Everyone gets that. Even
all
if
his
you're
teammates
the
get that.
long snapper.
Yeah,
also,
he's paying for his books are getting paid and his lodging and all of that. But that's what you typically negotiate in the NIL deal. Would be like an Arch Manning or someone like that? Be like, yeah, I'll come to your place, but I want this apartment downtown. Caleb Williams had the big old nice apartment in L.A. Like, you agree to those things and you sign documents and you arrange those things, and you don't just kick the can down the road like they apparently did here with nobody actually in agreement on anything. But, yeah, the scholarship has little to do with anything because every one of his teammates has that scholarship. So this was NIL. This was extra revenue, extra money in his pocket for coming to UNLV and for being the quarterback. And it's just the structure of it all that was a complete mess because there's guys playing quarterback right now. I mentioned one of them, Arch Manning. I guarantee you Quinn Ewers. I guarantee you a bunch of dudes in Ohio State, a bunch of dudes at Alabama. They are working under hundreds of thousands, if not multi-million-dollar agreements that has nothing to do with their scholarships.
Nothing.
And that's what we're talking about here.
All right. Now, the other part of UNLV being the college football universe is still the story about what's going to happen when it comes to the Pac-12.
Before you jump into that.
What?
This just in 2 minutes ago.
No!
From Yahoo Sports.
Oh, my God.
UNLV running back Michael Allen announced he's redshirting and transferring.
Oh, my God.
Well, I don't think that's like a dagger like the Sluka.
Sluka.
I think that's just the redshirt rule coming into play there. I think that's going to start being a headline that we're going to see a lot in the coming days, but that is very fitting timing-wise, Paul, since we're sitting here talking about it. But
108 yards.
I think this is more or less like
he's not playing.
I need to preserve my my year.
Yeah.
I'm not getting my NIL.
But you don't have to enter the portal.
Yeah, you do.
Well, I mean, you can redshirt, but he's just saying he's going to enter the portal.
Yeah,
he
but
wants to leave.
you can redshirt. Now I don't know what the school will do that if you say you're not going to play anymore.
Well, you can't enter the portal till December anyway. So.
Right. So okay.
But he's just letting it be known so that way, like, guess who's probably in his DMs right now? Some school that's interested. He's getting the party started.
Yeah. Two.
Yeah.
Yeah. They
I
were
mean,
there.
are we? Yeah.
Yeah. No. All right. Sluka may not have thrown the ball well, or he had 253 yards rushing, and also scored. He's the leading rusher for UNLV and Barry Odom so far in their 3-0 start. Now, there's the other story. The Mountain West and the Pac-12 catfight, or Pac-2 or 7.
It's 7
Russ
to 7
Dellinger
right now.
made this note. An update on the other UNLV story as the school deliberates on a conference decision. Mountain West is now offering a new version of a membership agreement to its 7 programs currently in the conference. Sizable signing bonuses. The agreements are only binding if all 7 of the programs sign. One other note. There's also the connection. We've seen this with North Carolina State, and other schools too. UCLA and USC, or Cal and UCLA, excuse me. UNLV's possible conference move, more complicated than others. The Nevada System of Higher Education Board of Regents governs both Nevada Reno and also UNLV and must approve decisions related to conference affiliation, likely during a public hearing. Now, I don't know yet if anyone has said, no, you can't go. However, there are contingencies like UCLA's paying Cal.
Yeah. I know that it's there. I've seen that played down a little bit about UNLV and Nevada. I mean, like, it's complicated, but I've seen it played down a little bit. Like, there's nothing that can't be worked out.
Well, and that's the case with anything. Ask Clemson.
I think that's actually the case in most of these types of stories. The unique one was the Cal system because they actually followed through with it, whereas everybody else barks that. Like, North Carolina can't leave without That's like, no, they just can't leave until North Carolina State has also found a spot where they're happy. That's basically what it is. But at this point, I think, are we really going to sacrifice this epic potential move for the sake of Nevada-Reno? Like, what are we doing here? Like, there's got to be some smarter people in the room. This isn't the level of moving to the Big Ten, guys. This is like a healthy move that needs to happen for this program to be what it wants to be as the big epicenter in Las Vegas. And if the school in Reno wants to bog that down, well, then y'all aren't serious about football. I'm sorry.
No, that's very true.
But there's nothing wrong with them at least seeing if they can get some scratch.
Well, yeah,
sure,
if they can slow it down, that's
Dellinger's saying that they're getting offered signing bonus money. Now you're doing that to keep teams in your conference. Gloria Navarez, we've had her on this show, Mountain West commissioner, saying that basically they are to say that the Mountain West was taking advantage of the Pac-12 is what the Pac-12 accused them of with the lawsuit, could not be farther from the truth. The Mountain West Conference wanted to help the Pac-12 schools and student athletes, but not at the expense of our own conference. So this is also kind of convoluted. John Wilner will join us around 4:30 to kind of like give us an idea of when they had what was the scheduling, and I hate to use the word, it's a disaster alliance, but they worked together to have a schedule because Oregon State, Washington State needed teams to play, right?
Yeah.
So they worked that out. And so, I mean, it seemed like everybody did what they were supposed to do, and now the Pac-12's upset because they're having to pay money for those who are leaving the Mountain West Conference. And I got those figures here in just a second.
Look,
Greg and Paul?
Yeah, I mean, Gloria Navarez, it's almost like Jim Phillips said, hey, here's the statement that I keep making about Clemson and Florida State. They signed an agreement. They know it's in the agreement. So suing us for any money that's they say is over the line. Well, you read the paper when you signed it, right? Like, this isn't new things. So part of this is all just to muddy the water, I'm sure.
Sure it is. Yeah, sure it is.
But, she's not wrong. I mean, they signed it, and now saying that it's not. But if it says, Oregon State, Washington State on that contract, and they knew what was in there when they signed it.
Unless
Greg,
they just made a
you
great
add on to that.
Huh?
You add on to that, and then I'm going to get to the actual figures she's talking about.
I mean, unless they made some grave error in negotiations, I don't see where there's really a case here. I think that this is a shot in the dark by the Pac-12 to try and somehow get a favorable ruling. I don't know all the ins and outs of their arrangement, obviously, but it seems pretty clear on the surface that, yeah, it's an exorbitant fee. It's kind of like the exorbitant fee they put in place to protect themselves from, the Pac breaking away and taking all their teams away to kill them and form a new Pac-12. So, my God, how do you expect the Mountain West to try and play this, knowing full well that was a possibility? They had to put something in place, so it seems pretty simple to me, but I don't know what the language is in the contract, nor would I be able to translate it anyway, so I guess we'll see in court. But based on the couple of lawyer takes I saw that seemed to be neutral, there doesn't seem to be much of a leg for the Pac-12 to stand on here.
They were almost disgusted in the lawsuit.
Yeah, so it's a matter of, like, this is what you signed up for, and we had to protect ourselves because look what you're doing right now. This is exactly why we had to do this.
I don't think they sat down and were like, hey, we'd like to build in this. You guys aren't trying to just steal our teams next year, are you?
No.
No. Why?
We'll help you out then.
Look, we've had that done to us.
Yeah.
The Big 12 and Big 10 and ACC have ravaged us and left us here in the woods. And we don't know what we're going to do. We're just lowly victims here, and we need help. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, but let's just put that in case you change your mind. And they're like, we're not going to change our mind. We love you guys. This is great. You're
that's okay.
buddies.
Still okay.
And then boom.
So here's the money that apparently is what the Pac-12 will owe the Mountain West Conference. For anyone keeping track, the Pac-12 and 5 departing schools from the Mountain West to pay to the Mountain West for what's happening. $55 million from the Pac-12 2 or 7 conference for withdrawal fees. $17 million per school, bylaws for the exit fees, $5.5 million per school for departure fees, and $167.5 million to the Mountain West Conference. If the number goes to 6 schools to the Pac, the amount goes to $192.5 million. If it goes to 6 schools, that means someone like UNLV or Air Force would leave. That is how much money is involved here with what's going on. Now, they're not going to end up paying all that, but that's right now what's on the table if, in fact, anybody else leaves or anyone else doesn't leave. That's what's being owed to the Mountain West.
Well, shout out to the author that you posted there, JY, on the Big Mountain podcast. They do a really good job.
Yes, they do.
Covering their corner of, the college football internet circles and what they like and the Mountain West and all that comes with, a lot of the pack stuff and everything else. Like, I liked what I've seen from those guys, so keep up the good work, first of all. And that's a nice little breakdown. And I think that it's a ungodly amount of money, and it should make a lot of people scratch their heads just in general, because we're talking about teams moving conferences and hundreds of millions of dollars at stake for what's not really like that much of an upgrade necessarily, and you're putting just a lot of movement and uncertainty and things out there with which a lot of money flowing. So it's a wild kind of last few days when it comes to the Mountain West and the pack reforming and all of that, and it does leave your head spinning a little bit. But you got to feel great if you're the American that you're just like, we're not involved. We closed our doors and we locked up and we're out of this thing. But for the Mountain West and the pack, like, I don't know how long this drags on, but it's been very interesting to see the pack go from thinking that they were a hunter, like an unbeatable apex predator, to very clearly being a lot more vulnerable than they realize and actually the prey, to now Oregon State and Washington State are in charge and they're realizing we got to be the damn apex predator. Like, we got to go out there and hunt, and they're doing that to their credit. I just don't know how legal it all is ultimately. But all that money is a result of, yes, greed and just the craziness of college football, but also, like, that's what Gloria Navarez and the Mountain West put in place to protect themselves. Yep. So, hey, yeah, it's a lot of money. Bet it'll make you think twice before trying to screw us over, won't it? Or bet it'll make you think twice before trying to jump ship in the dark of night. Almost like it makes sense that you had to put that in place to actually make it painful enough that you aren't going to get screwed over at some point. So, yeah, it's a lot of money, but it's the money that you had to have to protect yourself.
Yeah, it's no different than when Texas and Oklahoma made the decision. It was announced and reported by Brett Zerneman that even though they didn't pay what were some of the estimates to leave the conference, there was still exit fees. And then eventually they settled on a little bit more, and I think each paid, what was it, $80 million or so?
Yeah, that's part of this
each.
whole thing, too.
And then the same thing with anyone else who leaves. In the ACC, with what Clemson and Florida State are attempting to do, there are protections. If you're a conference and you have members, and the members all sign something, at some point they might get disgruntled. At some point there might be a break in the dam or whatever, and you can leave. But you have to have protection on the rights, the TV revenue money, and the ability, if you want to leave, but you leave before the television contract is up, there's going to be some consequences. We'll have John Wilner on at 4:30 to kind of give us his take on that corner of the universe. And then also here in a minute, Taylor McCark, former Rice quarterback with CBS and ESPN, on a couple of notes. Here's the Utah State AD, Diana Sabu. Reach and rise. Excited for Utah State's future academic and athletic achievements. Thank you to all who have built our Aggie legacy coming fall of 2026. Of course, they're one of the Mountain West teams that have decided that they're going to join the Pac-12.
Well, they're one that has screwed up this entire process because everything was in place, and then they decided to leave. Yep. So congratulations to Utah State, though, on your new move. And, I don't have a ton of man, what's the next thing that happens with this story? I do find it fascinating, though, and it's nice to look at it from an outside view that doesn't include everything Big 12 involved. There's not well, this happens. It's just a completely separate thing, which is kind of refreshing for me to see something that's just its own thing that doesn't necessarily infiltrate the other ecosystems as much. Now, I understand that also comes with territory that not as many people are interested in it because it's smaller schools, but I've found it to be an interesting story regardless, and I do think it's the consolidation that Brett McMurphy referred to as much as a year or two ago on this show, and others have referred to. They'd say this ominous consolidation where Ross Dellinger, you're like, what is that? You think, does that mean the Big 12 and the ACC, and that's the consolidation that the Florida States of the world leave, and then who's like Boston College is hanging on to try and remain in the big picture, or a Baylor or whoever. I think there's still some questions out there about that, but it appears as though the real consolidation is happening at a lower level like this, where you're looking at a conference like probably dying off at some point in the near future, or just not being at all what it once was, and therefore being relegated to another position on the chart. So this is part of that consolidation, when that word would be thrown around in the midst of all the other more headline, powerful type stories. This is not those, but it is a byproduct of all of those other stories that we talked about the last couple years.
Yeah, this doesn't so much affect in any way the Big 12. You never know about what eventually falls into place. But it is interesting to watch it. It's never ending, and it's a part of what has been about college football. Then the Sluka story with NIL, transfer portal, all that involved, it all just kind of converged at one time.
There is a Big 12 connection, and that is that if Gonzaga gets taken off the board, then that answers that question. If UConn in some fashion gets taken off the board, that answers that question. So it is somewhat related, but not on the front burner by any means.
I don't think, Gonzaga, UConn, basketball, all that would have been great, but now Gonzaga might be taken, and UConn's being, I guess, discussed by the Pac-12 for not just basketball.